Hi, it's Craig the Spa Tech, and on this video I am covering a problem that every hot tub owner eventually experiences, and that is, why can't I read chlorine on my test strip? I added chlorine, I put a test strip in, and I'm always reading 0. So this video is going to cover that. I'm going to start out here talking about your test strips. Your test strips do expire. There is an expiration date on the bottle. There's 50 test strips in a bottle. There's 52 weeks a year. And the expiration date is generally about a year to a year and a half out from when you buy them. So make sure that your test strips are new and accurate. They didn't expire 1, 2, 3 years ago. And when it comes to the test strips also, your alkalinity and pH are very important with any water chemistry problems. We have a lot of people who have very hard water and very high pH, and they don't really work to get that down. I've got another video on water chemistry that talks about a very easy to understand regimen of getting your water balanced. But your pH is very important on making your chlorine be effective and do its job. If your pH is at 8.4, your chlorine is only about 1/3 as effective as if your pH was down at 7.4. So make sure that your water is balanced. It all starts with alkalinity and pH balancing and then going from there. So let's go on to why this is happening. One of the reasons for this happening is people use chlorine, but they don't use a weekly spa oxidizing shock. That is very common. People think they just need to add chlorine to their water, but chlorine is not a standalone product for keeping your spa sanitized. Spa chlorine sanitizes your water, but the oxidizer rids your water of the old used inactive chlorine, which can over time inhibit your chlorine from doing its job, and I'm going to explain that. So here's a hot tub that's just been filled. It's warmed up. It has alkalinity and pH has been balanced. It's a sanitary spa, no contaminants, but also no chlorine. So we add chlorine to this clean and sanitary spa, and boom, we have active chlorine, which can be read on your test strip. Your test strip reads free chlorine, which is your active chlorine. It does not read your old used inactive chlorine. So here you've got chlorine present in your spa. It's active. You dip a test strip, you can read it. But you know, we all know what chlorine does. Chlorine attaches itself to an impurity and kills it. So when this happens, your chlorine, which was free chlorine, now becomes inactive chlorine. So your water is going to get bogged down with old used inactive chlorine if you just keep dumping chlorine in. The chlorine does its job, it becomes inactive, and you have to oxidize this out of your water. If you don't oxidize the old used inactive chlorine out of your water, and your old chlorine levels get above 12, 13 parts per million, your spa water gets bogged down and locked up with this old chlorine. So you have to add, a good idea is weekly maintenance, where you turn on the jets full bore, you have the cover open, you add the recommended dose of the oxidizer, and you run those pumps for about maybe 10 to 20 minutes. And this oxidizes all that old chlorine out of your water. This leaves your water now free and open to accept new chlorine, and to a small extent, it turns some of your old used inactive chlorine back to active chlorine. Now, it's also a good idea once a month to take your filters out and hose them off and clean them. The filter well can become an epicenter as the weeks go on. It becomes an epicenter of biocontaminant. You are filtering your water, and all these impurities are winding up in your filters and in your filter well. So if you don't clean your filters regularly, you wind up with this phenomenon. Your spa starts to get contaminated. You're adding chlorine, but the chlorine is attacking what's in the filters. So your chlorine is always at 0. Well, if you get a contaminant in there, it's going to fester and grow, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. When you get a spa that's contaminated, the water is getting cloudy. The water is starting to get a little bit of an odor to it. And this is a very common problem with spas where you're testing your water and your chlorine's coming back at 0, because when you have a contaminated spa, you add chlorine to it, and the chlorine knocks it back a little bit, but the contaminant is still in there. And that chlorine that you added is gone immediately because it just attacked the bacteria and impurities. It rendered itself inert, it became inactive, and the contaminant is still in there, and it continues to fester and grow. So you keep adding chlorine, it knocks it back a little bit, but it's still in there. Your chlorine's at 0, and it continues to fester and grow. So it's a good idea not to let yourself get to this point as well. Clean your filters quite regularly. And if you do run into this situation where your spa is becoming contaminated and you're bombarding it with chlorine, trying to rid this, make sure that you've cleaned your filters first, so this isn't the area where you're trying to knock out. Clean your filters. And when you're bombarding your contaminated spa, trying to knock that out by doing frequent and regular doses of chlorine, don't forget to add the shock as well, because the last thing you want is a contaminated spa that you're bombarding with chlorine, and now you're fighting two problems: a contaminated spa and a spa that is getting bogged down with old used inactive chlorine. So make sure that you're adding an oxidizer if you're trying to eradicate a contaminated spa. And also keep in mind that when you are adding chlorine to a spa, you are adding a small amount of cyanuric acid with every dose. That's why they want you to do a water change every 4 months, because regular doses of chlorine, after about 4 months, the cyanuric acid stabilizer in that chlorine is starting to reach a critical point where you're going to want to do a drain and refill, because that cyanuric acid has reached kind of a critical level. So if you're bombarding a contaminated spa with a bunch of doses of chlorine, you may want to do a water change sooner than you normally would. One other thing that can cause your test strips to always read 0 chlorine is the presence of phosphates in your water. This is not very common, but if you're using a product, metal, scale, and stain control quite regularly, this could very well be the culprit. We do have some situations where phosphates can be present in your source water. It's a byproduct of fertilizer runoff, but it's really not that common. The common reason for phosphates, and your pool and spa store, if they do a water test, if you specifically ask them, could you also do a phosphate test, they can check for that. The most common culprit for a phosphates being present in your water, rendering your chlorine inert, is this stain and scale metal control. If you've got a well and you've got iron in your water and you've got really hard water and pH, you may want to add 1 dose of the scale metal stain control when you first fill the spa, because this is going to help. When you fill the spa, you've got, maybe kind of brown water from the iron. This is going to help get that iron out of your water and into your filter and not stain and discolor your shell. And it's also going to help as you work for the next couple of days to get that pH balanced. It's going to help to keep that calcium hardness from building up on your shell. But quite honestly, once you filter out that iron and then rinse that iron out of your filter and put it back in, and once you balance that water, get your pH down to 7.4, there's no reason to keep using this product. There's no iron in your spa that's going to stain it. You filtered that out. There's no scale problems because you eventually did get your pH down to 7.4. So there's no reason to keep using stain and scale control after that first week of filling your water and balancing it. So if you do have a phosphate problem, that's where that might be coming from. So to reiterate, the 3 reasons for not reading chlorine on your test strip is using only chlorine and not oxidizer. Your spa's just bogged down with old used chlorine and you're in spa lock. 2, having a contaminant outbreak in your spa by not keeping your filters clean, or just kind of like not keeping your chlorine regiment up and a contaminant has taken hold in your spa. And 3, very rare but can happen, phosphates present in your water. So these are the 3 common reasons for not reading chlorine on your test strip. So I hope this video helped. If it did, give me a like. If you're a hot tub owner, especially a hot spring hot tub owner, consider subscribing, and maybe even link me to somebody that you know, friend or family member who has a hot tub and is experiencing problems. Maybe this will help them out. Again, this is Craig the Spa Tech. Catch you later.